Juxtaposition in Ní Dhuibhne's stories. Éilís Ní Dhuibhne's writing reflects her bilingualism as well as her long history studying folklore. The contemporary quality of bilingualism provides a stark contrast to the traditional perception of folklore. Ní Dhuibhne uses her wide range of knowledge and writing skills to juxtapose new and old ideas through a hybrid lens in a compelling and provocative way, particularly in her short stories. Ní Dhuibhne's unique writing style is exemplified in her stories that contrast new and old, past and present, folklore and modernity. This style is especially evident in her stories Midwife to the Fairies, The Garden of Eden, and Woof 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 for De Valera. First, it is noteworthy to mention Ní Dhuibhne's academic background that has been so influential of her writing. Ní Dhuibhne attended University College Dublin, where she received a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in pure English. She later wrote her PhD thesis entitled With His Whole Heart, a study of international folktale and oral and literary sources, and received a PhD in Irish folklore. When analyzing her work, it is important to note that Ní Dhuibhne studied extensively both the English language and Irish folklore. She is able to use the two subjects both interchangeably and in conjunction with one another. Before looking at Ní Dhuibhne's work, it is necessary to understand the significance of folklore not just in Irish culture, but in practically all West European cultures, especially Scandinavia and Norway. Ní Dhuibhne is only one of many scholars that have spent time researching and collecting folklore in Europe. Folklore is defined by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization as the totality of tradition-based creations of a cultural community, expressed by a group or individuals and recognized as reflecting the expectations of a community insofar as they reflect its cultural and social identity. Its standards and values are transmitted orally, by imitation or by other means. Its forms include, among others, language, literature, music, dance, games, mythology, rituals, customs, handicrafts, architecture, and other art. As the definition explains, folklore permeates every part of society. The oral transmittance ensures that it will be preserved from generation to generation. However, a great deal of traditional folklore has also been transcribed in references like the Handbook of Irish Folklore. It is an encyclopedia of all Irish and West European tradition. It includes folklore from many regions, since folklore is a transnational collection of traditions and stories that transcend political boundaries. It covers topics ranging from settlement and dwelling, to human life, to sports and pastimes, and certainly much more. Folklore is a dynamic stockpile of history that continues to be added to and applied as societies themselves change. Ní Dhuibhne has studied folklore not only in her academic endeavors, but also in her extensive work on the Dublin Urban Folklore Project, where she was able to participate in cross-cultural folklore collection. An important aspect of the collection process was conversation with native Dubliners in order to learn about their stories, speech, and traditions. She used the technique of transcription because it allows the tone and conversational style of the oral tradition to be exposed to the reader the same way as if they were hearing the story be told to them. Ní Dhuibhne's versatility as an author is exemplified in Midwife to the Fairies, the title story to her 2003 collection of short stories. In the story, she combines the traditional tale of the midwife to the fairies with current controversies of women's issues and infanticide. The mix of modernity and folklore symbolizes the pervasiveness of these issues throughout history. The central theme to the myth is that a mortal woman is retrieved in order to deliver a child in the other world. The tension between male and female is evident in the main character's relationship with both her husband and with the man who retrieves her and proceeds to threaten her if she goes to the police. Ní Dhuibhne frequently writes about modern-day challenges that women experience. Women face many conflicting relational forces as well as societal demands. These opposing influences are exemplified by the main character's dilemma to risk her life and report the infanticide or to stay quiet. Overall, the story is exemplary of Ní Dhuibhne's style. In an interview, she once stated, "How do I use folklore in my writing? I allude to old stories. It puts them in a large context, not only an Irish context, since the first thing one learns about oral narrative is its international nature. The Midwife to the Fairies story is transnational. It has been translated and modified in countless European countries. Therefore, the story can be read by a global audience because the implications of the story can be universally understood. Another story of Nigrinya's that juxtaposes two opposites is the Garden of Eden. Here, Nigrinya sets the idealized life of the neighbors in their Garden of Eden with the main character, Carmelita's garden and life. Carmelita's garden is quite lackluster, as is her marriage. She envies the perfectly manicured garden next door, and when the neighbors are out of town, she sneaks into their backyard and steals flowers in a pot from the garden. One day, she even steals a child's bike from the yard. It is not until this point in the story that the reader learns that Carmelita has lost a son in an accident. There is a sense of the persistence of the past permeating all facets of her life throughout the story. Carmelita's thoughts hint that this is not the first time her husband has walked out on her. When Carmelita steals the bike, it is evident that the past never leaves the present alone and never will in the future. The perfect garden next door is juxtaposed with Carmelita's neglected garden and broken marriage. In this story, Nigrinya reveals the powerful effect of the past on people. Finally, Woof 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 for De Valera shows the persistent nature of the past, as well as the consistency of Irish folklore throughout history. It remains the same even over great lengths of time. In this story, two sisters are going on a vacation together. One sister, the narrator, is well off and well traveled. The other sister, Pauline, is fascinated with simply being on an airplane. The story jumps to a flashback of the sisters' childhood. The girls are playing games and making up variations of the rhyme, Woof 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 for De Valera. The story skips ahead to a flashback of the sisters in college. They had ambitious plans, but quickly lost sight of them when Pauline became pregnant. The narrator had just begun dating an affluent man, who would later become her husband, but she did not want to risk losing him by asking him for money for Pauline to get an abortion. The flashback returns to the present, where the sisters are lounging by a pool. The past and the abortion come up in conversation, and Pauline repeats a made-up version of the popular child's tune Woof 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 for De Valera. In this version, the narrator is making fun of Pauline. The reader can interpret that the sisters' contentious past had not been forgotten by either sister. By choosing not to help her sister, the narrator essentially lets Pauline's aspirations disappear. The role of folklore in the story is also significant. By repeating the same rhyme at the end, Nigrinya conveys the pervasiveness of folklore and its ability to withstand the trials of time. It also symbolizes the lack of change in the narrator. Even years later, she has not grown out of her pettiness and desire for wealth. Both the folklore and the narrator's immaturity persist. As Nigrinya described, folklore is an international affair that is still very much alive today. By contrasting ancient myths with contemporary issues, Nigrinya emphasizes the continuity of these issues over time. This is evident both on the level of societal issues, as shown in Midwife to the Fairies, and on the individual or relational level, like in the Garden of Eden and Woof 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 for De Valera. In Midwife to the Fairies, Nigrinya's use of an internationally recognized myth in a modern setting raises awareness of the unceasing challenges faced by women and the issue of infanticide. In the Garden of Eden, Carmelita is unable to escape her past for a life like her neighbors. Finally, the narrator in Woof 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 for De Valera cannot recognize her own fault and role in her sister's situation. Nigrinya's unique style provokes the reader to consider the hegemonic rules in place that restrict change from occurring. She represents the consistency and fluidity of history through her usage of folklore. Nigrinya effectively combines opposing forces in her writing to create literary masterpieces. The end.